The sun rose over Westwood Heights, casting a warm glow on the Robinson family home. It was a modest two-story house with a well-kept lawn, standing as a testament to the family's roots in the community spanning 3 decades. Marcus Robinson, a broad-shouldered man with kind eyes and graying temples, adjusted his tie before heading downstairs. At 45, he had been teaching history at Westwood High for almost 20 years. Students loved his passionate lectures about civil rights movements and social justice. This morning, like every school day, he prepared his lesson while sipping coffee in the kitchen. His wife Aisha moved around him with practiced ease. At 43, she managed the Westwood Community Resource Center, helping neighbors with everything from job applications to housing assistance. Her warm smile and no-nonsense approach made her respected throughout the neighborhood. "Don't forget we have dinner with the Washingtons tonight," Aisha reminded Marcus while packing lunches. Their son Jamal rushed into the kitchen, laptop under one arm. At 17, he was the tech genius of the family, always working on some new app or program. Tall like his father but with his mother's quick wit, he grabbed a piece of toast. "The website for the tutoring program is almost done," he said, mouth half full. "I just need to fix the scheduling system." Zora, their 15-year-old daughter, entered last, camera hanging around her neck. She had been passionate about photography and journalism since middle school, documenting life in their neighborhood with striking honesty. "Mom, can I go to the park after school? Mr. Jenkins is letting the senior residents share stories about how the neighborhood has changed. I want to record them for my project." This was a typical morning for the Robinsons, busy, purposeful, and community-minded. Later that afternoon, Marcus was driving home from school when he noticed police cars with flashing lights ahead. He slowed down and saw officers surrounding a group of young black men outside the corner store. The young men were standing against the wall, hands up, while officers searched their backpacks. Marcus recognized one of the young men as Devon Washington, his student and the son of their dinner hosts for the evening. Devon was the captain of the debate team, hardly the type to cause trouble. Marcus pulled over, heart pounding. Using his phone, he began recording the scene from inside his car. You could see Devon trying to explain something, his expression a mixture of fear and frustration. One officer appeared to be getting increasingly agitated. When Marcus saw the officer reach for handcuffs, he stepped out of his car. "Excuse me, officer," Marcus called out respectfully. "That young man is my student. May I ask what's happening?" The officer turned, visibly annoyed. "Sir, please return to your vehicle. This doesn't concern you." "I believe it does," Marcus replied calmly. "These are children from our community. I'd like to understand the situation." More neighbors began to gather, watching silently. Some took out their phones. The mounting attention seemed to change the officer's approach. After a few tense minutes, they returned the backpacks and allowed the young men to leave, claiming they matched descriptions of suspects in a nearby incident. That evening at dinner, Devon described the humiliation and fear he felt during the encounter. His parents shared similar experiences. As Marcus and Aisha drove home, a heavy silence filled their car. "This can't keep happening," Aisha finally said. "Our children deserve better." Marcus nodded, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "Then we need to do something about it." Neither realized that this day would mark the beginning of their family's transformation from concerned citizens to community activists. The community center buzzed with voices 3 days after the incident. Marcus and Aisha had called an emergency meeting, and the room was packed beyond capacity. People stood against walls, sat on windowsills, and crowded doorways. The tension in the air was thick enough to touch. Marcus stood at the front, scanning familiar faces. He cleared his throat and the room quieted. "Thank you all for coming tonight. After what happened with Devon and the other boys, Aisha and I realized something important. These aren't isolated incidents. They're happening to many of us." Heads nodded throughout the crowd. An elderly woman raised her hand. "My grandson was stopped 3 times last month, just walking home from his night shift," she said, her voice shaking. 3 times in 4 weeks. Once the first story broke through, others followed like a dam bursting. A father described being pulled over twice in one day. A college student talked about officers questioning why she was entering her own apartment building. A local business owner shared how police frequently asked customers to leave his store without cause. Jamal sat in the corner, laptop open, fingers flying across the keyboard as he documented each story. His face grew more serious with each new account. Aisha stepped forward when the stories finally slowed. We need to do more than just talk. We need proof. We need organization. From the back of the room, Davon Washington stood up. Mr. Robinson records his lectures for students who miss class. Why don't we record what's happening to us? Jamal closed his laptop and raised his hand. I can build a website, a secure place where people can upload videos, share experiences, and document everything. Date, time, officer badge numbers, all of it. The room erupted in discussion. Some worried about retaliation. Others questioned if it would make any difference. An older man in a worn suit raised his hand, silencing the crowd. I've lived in Westwood Heights for 63 years, he said, his voice carrying wisdom earned through decades of struggle. I marched in the 60s. I've seen change happen, but never without evidence, organization, and courage. These young folks are right. As the meeting continued, the Robinsons' living room was transformed into an operations center. Zora set up her camera equipment on the dining table, teaching neighbors how to properly record incidents. Jamal sat surrounded by tech-savvy teenagers, designing the website's structure on large sheets of paper. We'll call it Westwood Witness, Jamal announced, sketching a simple logo. It needs to be easy to use, even for people who aren't good with technology. Marcus and Aisha worked with a small group to draft guidelines for safely documenting interactions with police. Always maintain distance, Marcus emphasized. Record, but never interfere. Your safety comes first. As midnight approached, the house finally emptied except for the Robinson family. They gathered in the kitchen, exhausted but energized. Do you think this will actually work? Zora asked, uploading test footage to Jamal's prototype site. Aisha placed a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder. Maybe not at first. Real change takes time. But every movement starts somewhere, Marcus added. Rosa Parks wasn't the first person to refuse to give up her seat, but her case became the one that sparked change. Later that night, while everyone slept, Jamal worked until dawn. When the family came down for breakfast, he greeted them with tired eyes but a triumphant smile. Westwood Witness is live, he announced, turning his laptop around to show a clean, simple website with a map of their neighborhood. Now we just need people to use it. None of them could have predicted how quickly that would happen. By lunchtime, the first real incident had been uploaded, an unjustified stop and search of a teenager outside the public library. By dinner, there were 7 more. The Robinson family's kitchen table became the headquarters for a movement none of them had planned to start, but all were now committed to seeing through. 3 weeks after launching Westwood Witness, the Robinson family's dining room table disappeared under stacks of printed reports. 47 incidents have been documented, each one carefully verified by cross-checking witness accounts and video evidence. We need to take this to the city council, Aisha said one evening, organizing papers into a thick binder. These patterns are too clear to ignore. Marcus nodded, reviewing a map where Jamal had plotted each incident. Red pins clustered heavily in certain neighborhoods. The next council meeting is tomorrow night, Marcus said. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes. Zora looked up from her editing software. 3 minutes to present all of this? That's impossible. We'll make it work, Aisha replied, determination hardening her voice. Sometimes you only get one chance to be heard. That night, the family rehearsed Aisha's presentation repeatedly, trimming it down to the most powerful points. Jamal prepared simplified charts showing the concentration of incidents. Zora edited a 90-second video combining the most troubling encounters. The next evening, the Robinsons arrived at City Hall an hour early. The council chamber was nearly empty when they claimed seats in the front row. Gradually, the room filled with familiar faces from their community meetings. Some carried small signs. Westwood demands justice and equal protection under law. Mayor Jenkins called the meeting to order promptly at 7:00 p.m. The Robinsons sat through discussions about zoning permits and budget allocations, waiting patiently for the public comment period. Finally, at 8:45 p.m., the mayor announced, "We'll now take public comments. Each speaker has 3 minutes. First on our list is Aisha Robinson." Aisha approached the podium confidently, placing her binder and a USB drive on the small shelf. "Good evening. I'm here to present documented evidence of a troubling pattern in police interactions with citizens in certain Westwood neighborhoods." She had barely finished her opening sentence when Councilman Pierce interrupted. "Mrs. Robinson, public comments should address items on tonight's agenda. I don't see police matters listed." Aisha kept her composure. "With respect, Councilman, city safety concerns are always relevant." "We have procedures," the mayor interjected. "Perhaps you should schedule a meeting with the police commissioner instead." From the audience, Marcus watched his wife's shoulders straighten, a sign he recognized from 20 years of marriage. She was digging in. "We've attempted to schedule such meetings 5 times in the past 2 weeks. All requests were denied or ignored," Aisha replied, her voice steady but firm. "These 47 documented incidents deserve your attention." The council president leaned forward. 47? That seems rather excessive." "One would be excessive," Aisha countered. 47 is a pattern that demands action." She reached for the USB drive. "I have a brief video that illustrates." "I'm afraid we don't accept visual presentations during public comments," the mayor interrupted. "Policy considerations, you understand." A murmur of dissatisfaction rippled through the audience. Jamal exchanged looks with Zora, both sensing the deliberate roadblocks being erected. Aisha stood silently for a moment, then spoke with quiet intensity. "When my grandfather was denied the right to vote in Alabama, he was told it was just policy. When my mother couldn't get a home loan in a certain neighborhood, that too was just policy." She closed her binder slowly. "Your policies are preventing you from seeing the truth about what's happening in this city. We came here in good faith, hoping for dialogue. Instead, we found more closed doors." The mayor tapped his gavel. "Your 3 minutes are up, Mrs. Robinson." As Aisha returned to her seat, something unexpected happened. Devin Washington's grandmother, Mrs. Eloise Washington, stood up from her chair. Then another community member stood. Then another. Soon, half the room was standing in silent solidarity. The council members shifted uncomfortably. Later that night, local news reported dramatic standoff at city council meeting as residents protest treatment of police accountability advocates. Driving home, the family was quiet until Zora finally spoke. "They didn't even look at our evidence." "No," Marcus agreed, "but they showed everyone exactly why we need to keep fighting." Aisha stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past. "Tomorrow, we try a different approach." The rejection at City Hall hadn't defeated the Robinsons. It had only made their resolve stronger. Saturday morning arrived with the sound of rain tapping against windows. Marcus stood in his garage, painting large letters on a piece of plywood. "The ESTWOE deserves better." Around him, neighbors worked on their own signs, some hunched over cloth banners spread across the driveway. "Do you think people will still come in this weather?" asked Mr. Washington, glancing at the gray sky. Marcus nodded confidently. "Rain didn't stop the Selma marchers. It won't stop Westwood." Inside the house, Aisha coordinated a small army of volunteers. The living room had transformed into Command Central, with Jamal managing a newly created social media campaign from one corner. "We're trending locally," he announced, eyes fixed on his screen. "Over 300 people have confirmed they're coming." Zora moved through the crowd, camera in hand, capturing the energy of preparation. She paused to interview Mrs. Eloise Washington. "Why are you here today, at 82 years old, in the rain?" Zora asked, holding her microphone steady. The elderly woman's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Because some fights are worth getting wet for, child. I've been waiting 60 years to finish what we started in the 60s. By noon, despite the persistent drizzle, people gathered at Westwood Park. The crowd stretched beyond what even the Robinsons had hoped for. Teachers, nurses, store owners, high school students, grandparents. Some carried umbrellas, others wore rain ponchos, but all carried signs or wore shirts supporting the cause. Marcus stepped onto the small platform they had set up near the park entrance. His voice, trained by years in the classroom, carried across the gathering. "Thank you all for coming today. We're not here to cause trouble. We're here because we love this community too much to stay silent." He looked out at the sea of faces, recognizing most from years of living and working in Westwood. "Today, we march to be seen, We march for dignity. We march for equal treatment under the law. This isn't about attacking the police. It's about making our city better for everyone, including them. The crowd nodded in agreement, some calling out yes. And that's right. Marcus continued. Everyone has received the route map. We'll proceed peacefully down Main Street, past City Hall, and return here for a community speak-out. Remember what we practiced. If anyone tries to provoke you, don't engage. We're here to be heard, not to create conflict. As the march began, Aisha and Marcus took the front line, their children just behind them. The procession stretched for nearly 3 blocks, moving slowly but steadily through Westwood streets. Store owners came to their doors. Some looked uncertain, others waved in support. Cars honked as they passed, most in solidarity. Local news crews appeared, capturing footage of the largest demonstration Westwood had seen in decades. As they approached City Hall, Marcus felt a tightening in his chest. 6 police officers stood on the steps, watching the procession. Among them was Officer Daniels, who had been involved in the incident with Devon. The marchers grew quiet as they passed, signs held high. Marcus maintained eye contact with the officers, his expression neither confrontational nor fearful. Just as the Robinson family reached the steps, something unexpected happened. Officer Rodriguez, the youngest of the group, stepped forward. For a tense moment, nobody knew what would happen. Then she simply nodded respectfully to the marchers. "Not all of us disagree with what you're doing," she said quietly, just loud enough for Marcus and Aisha to hear. The march continued past City Hall without incident, growing in energy as they returned to the park. What had started as a family's response to injustice had become a community movement. As they reached the park again, the rain finally stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds, casting golden light across the gathered crowd. Zora captured the moment on her camera, her parents standing together, surrounded by hundreds of neighbors, their faces showing the same mixture of determination and hope. "This," she whispered to herself as she snapped the photo, "is just the beginning." 2 weeks after the successful march, the Robinson family gathered for Sunday dinner. The mood was lighter than it had been in months. Local news had covered their movement extensively, and 3 city council members had reached out to schedule meetings. "Pass the potatoes, please," Jamal said, scrolling through his phone. Westwood Witness got 6 new uploads today. But here's something interesting. They're not all negative. Someone posted a video of Officer Rodriguez helping a group of kids fix their basketball hoop. Marcus nodded approvingly. That's important too. This isn't about villainizing all police. It's about accountability and building better relationships. Aisha's phone buzzed. She checked the message and her expression brightened. The Community Center Board approved our town hall for next Friday. Police Chief Williams has agreed to attend. Really? Zora looked up from her plate, surprised. I didn't think he would come. Public pressure works, Aisha replied. Plus, not everyone in the department wants this tension. Some officers genuinely want things to improve. The family's conversation was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. Marcus opened it to find Devon Washington standing on their porch, breathing hard as if he'd been running. "Mr. Robinson," he gasped, "they've arrested Jamal." "What?" Marcus felt his heart drop. "Jamal's right here." Devon shook his head urgently. "Not your Jamal. Jamal Brown. He was recording police outside the convenience store. They took his phone and arrested him for interfering with police business. His mom just called my grandmother." The peaceful dinner forgotten, the Robinson family sprang into action. Within minutes, they were in their car heading toward the police station. Aisha made calls to community members who had legal experience, while Zora set up a live stream on the Westwood Witness page. "Stay in the car," Marcus instructed as they pulled up to the station. "I'll go in first and find out what's happening." "I'm coming with you," Aisha said firmly, already opening her door. "Zora, keep the live stream going. Jamal, contact everyone on our rapid response list." The police station lobby was small and brightly lit. A desk sergeant looked up as Marcus and Aisha entered. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone professionally neutral. "We're here about Jamal Brown," Aisha said. "He was brought in about 30 minutes ago." The sergeant checked his computer. "Are you family members?" "Community advocates," Marcus replied. "His mother asked us to check on him while she's on her way." The sergeant's expression hardened slightly. Only family can get information at this time. Before either Robinson could respond, the door to the back offices opened. Chief Williams walked out, stopping short when he saw them. "Mr. and Mrs. Robinson," he said, recognition in his eyes. "I thought I might be seeing you tonight." Marcus stepped forward. "Chief Williams, we'd like to know why Jamal Brown was arrested for recording police in a public space, which is his legal right." The chief's face remained unreadable. "The report says he was interfering with officers performing their duties." "We have 3 witness statements saying he was standing at least 10 feet away," Aisha countered, pulling out her phone to show messages. Outside, car doors slammed as more community members arrived. Through the glass doors, Marcus could see at least 20 people gathering, including Mrs. Washington and several church leaders. The chief noticed too. His jaw tightened as he looked back at the Robinsons. "This situation doesn't require a protest," he said quietly. "This isn't a protest," Aisha replied. "This is a community concerned about one of its children." Just then, Mrs. Brown burst through the doors, her face streaked with tears. "Where is my son? I want to see my son." Marcus watched something shift in Chief Williams' expression, a moment of genuine humanity breaking through the professional mask. "Mrs. Brown," the chief said, his tone softening slightly, "come with me, we'll sort this out." As Mrs. Brown followed the chief, she reached out and squeezed Aisha's hand in silent gratitude. Outside, the crowd had grown to nearly 50 people, standing in peaceful vigil. News vans pulled up, cameras rolling. For the first time, Marcus felt the true power of what they had built, not just a family taking a stand, but a community finding its voice. The community center buzzed with tension as people filled every available seat, 2 months after Jamal Brown's arrest, which had ended with charges dropped and a reluctant apology from the department. The Robinson family had organized something unprecedented, a formal dialogue between residents and police leadership. At the front of the room, a long table held 6 chairs. On one side sat Chief Williams and 2 ranking officers. The other side remained empty, waiting for the Robinson family. Backstage, Marcus paced nervously while Aisha reviewed her notes. Zora adjusted her father's tie while Jamal triple-checked his presentation on a tablet. "Remember," Aisha told her family, "today isn't about accusations, it's about solutions." A young woman with a briefcase approached them. "The Robinsons? I'm Angela Torres from the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division. I'm here to observe, but I'd like to speak with you after the meeting." Marcus and Aisha exchanged surprised glances. Their work had attracted federal attention. As the family walked to their seats, the room fell silent. Marcus scanned the crowd, noting how the community had divided itself, residents on one side, officers in uniform clustered on the other. The physical separation symbolized exactly what they needed to fix. Aisha spoke first, her voice steady and clear. "Thank you all for coming today. This isn't an easy conversation, but necessary ones rarely are. Chief Williams, we appreciate your willingness to be here." The chief nodded stiffly. "The department is committed to serving all citizens of Westwood." Jamal stood and connected his tablet to the projector. The screen filled with statistics and maps gathered from Westwood Witness. The data showed clear patterns. Certain neighborhoods experienced significantly more stops, searches, and arrests, often with minimal or no justification. "This isn't about isolated incidents," Jamal explained. "The pattern is systematic and measurable." One of the officers, Captain Reynolds, leaned forward. "These numbers don't account for crime rates in different areas." "Actually, they do," Jamal replied confidently, clicking to a new slide. "Even adjusting for reported crime rates, the disparity remains significant." As the technical discussion continued, Zora noticed something important. Residents and officers who had been avoiding eye contact were now engaged, some even nodding at points made by the other side. After an hour of presentation and initial discussion, Marcus introduced the next phase. "Numbers tell one story, but personal experiences matter too. We've asked 3 community members to share their encounters, followed by 3 officers who want to offer their perspective." Mrs. Washington went first, describing how her grandson had been handcuffed simply for running to catch a bus. Her dignity and composure moved everyone in the room. Then came a surprise. Officer Rodriguez stepped forward. She spoke about joining the force to help her community, but gradually feeling disconnected from the people she served. Some days, the only interaction I have with residents is during traffic stops or responding to calls. Nobody wants to talk to the police unless there's trouble. That distance makes it harder to understand each other. Her honesty created a breakthrough moment. The conversation shifted from accusations to a genuine exchange of perspectives. Near the end of the meeting, Chief Williams stood up. The room quieted, anticipation hanging in the air. "I've been in law enforcement for 27 years, he began slowly. I've seen departments resist change until forced by lawsuits or federal oversight. That's not the path I want for Westwood." He looked directly at the Robinson family. "Your approach has been firm but fair. You brought data, not just complaints. You invited dialogue instead of only demanding action." The chief placed a folder on the table. "This is a proposal for a civilian oversight committee with real authority. I'm asking the Robinsons and community leaders to work with us to implement it properly." A murmur of surprise rippled through the audience. This was more than anyone had expected. As the meeting concluded, people didn't immediately leave. Officers and residents formed small conversation groups, exchanging contact information and continuing the dialogue. Angela Torres approached the Robinsons again. "What you've accomplished here is remarkable. Most communities only reach this point after years of conflict or federal intervention. I'd like to discuss documenting your approach as a potential model for other cities." Marcus looked at his family, Aisha's proud smile, Jamal's quiet confidence, Zora's observant eyes capturing everything. What had begun as a family standing up against injustice was becoming something much larger. The conference room at City Hall felt different today. 6 months after the community center meeting, the newly formed Civilian Oversight Committee was holding its first official session. Marcus adjusted his tie nervously as he looked around the table. The committee's composition reflected months of careful negotiation. 3 community representatives, 2 police officers, a retired judge, and a civil rights attorney. Aisha sat beside him, reviewing the agenda one last time. "Never thought we'd be sitting here," she whispered, squeezing his hand under the table. Mayor Jenkins entered, followed by news reporters and dozens of community members. The room quickly filled beyond capacity. "Today marks a new chapter for Westwood," the mayor announced, uncharacteristically solemn. "The establishment of this committee acknowledges past failures and commits to a better future." Marcus noticed how differently the mayor spoke now compared to that first dismissive council meeting. Public pressure had created political will, and when federal interest followed, even the most resistant officials found reasons to support reform. The mayor continued, "I'll now invite Marcus Robinson to officially open the committee's first session." Marcus approached the podium, acutely aware of all that had led to this moment. The late-night strategy sessions, the community meetings in church basements, the marches in rain and shine, the constant documentation of incidents. The journey had tested his family in ways he never imagined. "This committee exists because ordinary citizens refuse to accept the status quo," Marcus began. "But its success will depend on everyone in this room, officers and residents alike, committing to honest dialogue and meaningful change." From the audience, Jamal and Zora watched their parents with pride. At 18, Jamal had deferred college acceptance to continue developing Westwood Witness, which had evolved into a sophisticated platform now being adopted by communities in neighboring cities. Zora's documentary, A Family Stands Up, had won a Regional Youth Film Award and been screened at 3 civil rights conferences. Her footage had become an important historical record of Westwood's transformation. As the committee began reviewing its powers and responsibilities, Chief Williams presented the department's first quarterly transparency report, a direct result of the oversight agreement. "Traffic stops are down 30% while successful intervention rates have increased," the chief reported. "More importantly, community satisfaction surveys show improvement across all neighborhoods." Officer Rodriguez, now promoted to Community Liaison Sergeant, added, "We've implemented new training focused on de-escalation and cultural awareness. 90% of the department has completed the program." Aisha noted how the officer's voice carried confidence and pride that had been missing before. Change wasn't just happening on paper, it was changing people too. The most powerful moment came when Mrs. Washington addressed the committee. At 83, she needed help reaching the microphone, but her voice rang clear and strong. "I've lived long enough to see promises made and broken many times," she said. "But this feels different." Last week, officers helped organize a basketball tournament with neighborhood children. I saw young boys high-fiving police instead of fearing them. That's the change we needed. As the meeting progressed to public comments, Marcus noticed Devin Washington sitting beside a uniformed Officer Daniels, the same officer involved in the incident that had started everything. They were quietly discussing something, nodding in apparent agreement. Later, Devin explained that he'd been participating in the department's Youth Advisory Council. "Officer Daniels actually apologized to me. We're working on a project to help officers understand what it's like to be a young person here." That evening, the Robinson family gathered at their dining table, the same table where their movement had been planned. A cake with congratulations written in blue icing sat in the center. To the Robinsons, Marcus said, raising his glass of lemonade, "Who proved that one family can make a difference?" Zora shook her head. "Not just us, Dad. We only got the ball rolling. The whole community made this happen." Jamal's phone buzzed with a news alert. He smiled as he read it. "The governor just announced she's creating a statewide commission based on Westwood's model. They want Mom and Dad to consult." Aisha looked at her family, tired but fulfilled, forever changed by the stand they had taken. "This was never just about Westwood," she said softly. "This was about showing what's possible when people refuse to look away from injustice." Outside their window, the sun set on a community transformed, not perfect, but moving steadily toward something better. 1 year to the day after the first Westwood March, hundreds of people gathered in the community park. Colorful banners hung between trees, and a stage had been set up near the central fountain. Children played tag between rows of chairs while adults chatted, creating a festive atmosphere that felt more like a celebration than a protest. Marcus stood at the edge of the crowd, taking in the scene with quiet amazement. So much had changed in 12 months. The Civilian Oversight Committee had become a respected institution. Police training had been completely redesigned with community input. Complaint rates had dropped by over 60%. "Hard to believe it all started with us, isn't it?" Aisha said, appearing beside him with 2 cups of lemonade from the refreshment table. Marcus accepted the drink gratefully. "Sometimes I still wonder if we did the right thing, putting our family in the spotlight like that." They both looked across the park where Zora was interviewing Officer Rodriguez for her follow-up documentary. Nearby, Jamal demonstrated the newest version of Westwood Witness to visitors from neighboring cities. "I think they've answered that question for us," Aisha replied with a smile. Mayor Jenkins approached the podium on stage, tapping the microphone. The crowd gradually quieted. 1 year ago, Westwood was a community divided, the mayor began. "Today, we gather to celebrate how far we've come and recommit to the work ahead." The audience applauded as the mayor invited various speakers to share their perspectives. Chief Williams spoke about departmental changes. Mrs. Washington described improvements in her neighborhood. Devin discussed the Youth Advisory Council's achievements. When it was Marcus' turn to speak, he felt unexpectedly emotional. Standing at the podium, he looked out at faces that had become like extended family through months of struggle and triumph. "A year ago, we marched because we felt powerless," Marcus said. "Today, we gather because we've discovered our collective strength. The most important lesson we've learned isn't about policing or policy. It's about persistence. Change happens when ordinary people refuse to accept injustice as normal." As Marcus returned to his seat, a commotion at the park entrance caught everyone's attention. A group of visitors was arriving. Community leaders from 5 neighboring cities, accompanied by state representatives and even a U.S. congresswoman. The congresswoman took the stage, her presence bringing a hushed anticipation. "What's happening in Westwood isn't staying in Westwood," she announced. "Today, I'm introducing the Community Oversight and Police Accountability Act, modeled directly on your success here. This legislation would provide funding and guidelines for similar programs nationwide." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Aisha grabbed Marcus' hand, tears in her eyes. Later, as the formal program ended and music filled the park, the Robinson family found a quiet moment together at a picnic table under an oak tree. "So what's next for us?" Jamal asked, closing his laptop for the first time that day. "I start college next month," he continued. Zora's documentary is headed to a national film festival. Mom's running the oversight committee, and Dad's consulting with the state. Are we still the activist family if we're all going different directions? Marcus looked at his children with pride. At 18 and 16, they had already helped change their community in ways most adults never would. The work is never really finished, he said thoughtfully. There will always be something that needs fixing in this world. Zora nodded, her filmmaker's eye watching the diverse crowd enjoying the afternoon. But we know how to do it now. We know change is possible. Aisha smiled at her family. And we've learned the most important lesson, that ordinary people have extraordinary power when they stand together. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the park, the Robinson family joined the community dance that had spontaneously formed near the stage. Young and old, residents and police officers, people of all backgrounds moved together to the music. Mrs. Washington, watching from her chair, smiled at the sight. She waved Marcus over. "You know what the best part is?" she said, her eyes twinkling. "This isn't just about what you fixed. It's about all the young ones who watched you do it. They'll never forget that standing up matters." Marcus looked across the park at his children dancing with their friends, their faces alight with joy and possibility. "No," he agreed softly. "They never will." The story of the Robinson family would continue, evolving as they did. But what they had built in Westwood, hope, accountability, and community, would remain long after this day was just a memory.